Welcome to the Taproxy Method, creating confident learners. The Taproxy Method uses a unique combination of breath work, brain-body work, gratitude, and a clay-based program to affect the neuroplasticity of the brain in students, to help strengthen their mind-body connection, help them develop a growth mindset, and most importantly, trust and confidence in themselves. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes. One way to support the Creating Confident Learners podcast is to leave a 5-star review and written review anywhere you listen to it. Thanks so much, and let's get started. There was a little bit of wiggle in the beginning of the year, which is typical when kids move from place to place on any level, whether there are academic discrepancies, whether there are, learning differences. Be sure to sign up for the Foundation course. This course is here to support you, both parents and educators. It teaches the exact foundational tools I have used with students to increase focus, ease anxiety, and help raise confidence and self-esteem so that they can succeed in all areas of their lives, including academics. It's made into bite-sized digestible pieces to help you apply these tools right away. I typically work with kids who don't necessarily have any big distinctions and discrepancies in learning, but who are struggling with the pace of the class, the grade level, the pace of their peers, the highly distracted ones, the sensitive kids, the less mature kids, the ones who don't pick up information through implicit instruction and need explicit tools, explicit instruction and teaching techniques to unpack how they process and learn. And it's kind of those kids who are getting lower grades than they are capable, or they have those gaps in knowledge. I call them the ones that wiggle, where they're just not solid with where they're at on their academic path. What is interesting is when we get them solid in their foundation, they do well. They sometimes exceed their peers, or at least meet their peers where they're at. But we really have to, figure out what is making them wiggle, what is making that foundation at whatever grade level, whatever core subject that they're struggling with, whether it is the dyslexia or the maturity or the lack of focus or the lack of confidence, or the material itself, the learning how to read properly, spelling, writing, math, those core subjects. And it's hard in the beginning, but once we figure out how a child ticks, what they need, then it gets easy and easier for them. I'm all about finding and trying to figure out how a kid ticks, what they're getting, and where their gaps of knowledge are. I know of one 5th grader who went from F's in math to A's within a few weeks, just by her dad sitting with her to help her through the overwhelm. I have 2 students who are in 7th and 9th grade who, just by being exposed to harder material this school year with consistent support and helping them both and work in a way that makes sense to them, they feel confident through the material to the point of where they feel confident. They're doing better with the harder schools. They both transferred into more academically challenging school years, from 6th to 7th grade in one case, and then from middle school, but a less academically rigorous middle school into a proper high school. And, they are both doing better with these harder schools than they did last year, I would argue. Less mistakes and handling the workload in general better, even though these years are harder, even though the material is significantly harder than last year. They have the tools in place, and so they're not wiggling once they got hang of it. Usually there was a little bit of wiggle in the beginning of the year, which is typical when kids move from place to place on any level, whether there are academic discrepancies, whether there are, learning differences. Kids aren't always going smoothly through the academic path. Oftentimes they need some support. Any kid, whether they are an AP student or a kid who's struggling, one-on-one attention to what they're getting, taking the next step to push them and make them be confident, or the next gap in knowledge, or the next logical step to make them better learners, more prepared for what's coming through, is going to benefit any child. Anytime that they have the therapeutic understanding of getting to talk about what they understand, what they don't, actually teach to me their understanding, or saying, hey, I do get this, I don't get this, and really, tailoring education fully to each child makes such a difference. And then you don't see those wiggles. You see a solid foundation where when new material comes in, they are capable and ready. And confidence in academics stems from being sure that you understand, sure that you know, and sure when you don't know something and being willing to take the extra time that you need. I have one student, actually saw him yesterday, and he had straight A's. He had gotten bad grades at the beginning of his 6th grade year and then fixed them. And then it's a new semester. And again, some of the grades went down. And we talked about it. He's like, everything's just harder, right? The second semester tends to be harder in general. But what was interesting, when he told me the things that he didn't understand, which was geometry and those terms, they were brand new. And then also just, grammar and the idea of direct objects, indirect objects. They weren't big gaps in knowledge, but they were affecting his confidence and affecting his work and what he was doing. But when we spent only 10 minutes on both of those and he understood it, and I was like, yep, got it. The whole dynamic changed, and now he's ready to really change those grades because he addressed exactly what he didn't know. And so now we talked about yesterday, his job from the time he sees me to the next time he sees me is to bring any knowledge that he doesn't understand so that we can spend that 5 to 10 minutes. I did check in with his parents, and apparently they had been working on these ideas, but it just doesn't stick. And I know sometimes as a parent, addressing those gaps isn't as easy as maybe a teacher or tutor or another adult. In other cases, that 5th grader whose father sat down with her and made sure she did and understood and wasn't overwhelmed anymore, that fixed it. So, just by getting them to feel confident what they understand and don't understand, and then addressing what they don't understand fully so that they, again, feel confident in the academics, that they do know it and they're sure that they know it. The quickest route to absorption of material is through one-on-one adult attention. I always say that. It's just the quickest thing. We can do way more in 1 hour, an hour and a half, a couple hours than, I sometimes argue a full school day in a group setting. So those are the direct way to get it. And by specifically teaching to their gaps in knowledge, that wiggle, that lack of foundation, slowly those potholes get filled in one by one. So part of this is making sure that every piece of schoolwork is actually understood, comprehended, and completed. I know that a lot of kids who do like kind of the online stuff independently, both homeschool or iReady, they'll go through the process, answer the question or answer that worksheet with the pattern, but if you ask them to explain their thinking, to show you what they understand, to teach you, a lot of times there was nothing that was retained in those situations where things were done super independently. It depends on the kid and how highly motivated and how highly aware they are or not. I've seen so many kids who are homeschooled online, these self-taught lessons where these kids haven't actually absorbed the information that they were supposed to learn. And I do know we learn through discussion, we learn through practice, we learn through making academic mistakes, we learn through accountability, and we learn from really knowing whether we understand something or not. I typically work with a lot of C kids at the beginning where they can really be, and these are these wiggle kids that I talk about, where they really can be A and B students with the right type of scaffolding and support. Again, sometimes people ask me what I do. And again, I work with as young as kindergarten all the way through high school. I've homeschooled, but also filled in gaps in knowledge support and academic support. But when people ask what I do, it's really what I do is finding out what's going on and what is the next best academic step for that particular child in the moment, the teaching moment, as well as to keep their core skills in an upward trajectory in the type of content, especially reading. One of the things I see, and writing too, kids don't get enough practice of writing. And the problem with writing is it takes time to do. But I often see kids who have learned to read just fine, but then as the years go higher and higher and higher, they're reading, second grade level books in like third or fourth, and they're reading really just too easy books where there's no stretch. There's no stretch in diction and vocabulary and deeper sentence structures. And so really if they're not doing content level, grade level, or content level that's hard enough for where they're at, for their age range, then that's where they start to slip too. So where they might have been doing really, really well in those younger years, and then we get to the middle of the elementary school or upper elementary school, and they just haven't been pushed in a way that they need to become successful middle school students, to become successful high school students. I've had multiple students over the years who struggle with reading. That process itself is hard for them. But what's interesting with these kids, what is not hard is math. So I have third graders pushing and doing fifth grade concepts in math. I have kindergartens who are playing with 4 to 5 digit addition and subtraction problems, the type of work, you think of a fourth or third grade doing, as well explaining their complex thinking and methods of putting numbers together to add them correctly. Like think of 3 plus 5, but they know that 4 plus 4 is actually 8. And so they move stuff around, which is really cool. When we can show these kids who struggle in one thing, like reading, but math, they are off the charts with their, mathematical thinking and problem solving, their confidence soars to know that they have this skill. And then usually that transfers and helps them apply the harder work, the growth mindset, the open mindset to persevere through the 10,000 hours to become an expert reader and to make it make sense. And again, a lot of these kids who have this mathematical type of thinking, they do have that right brained, mixing up of letters or tracking or some of that stuff in the earlier years that has to be addressed early so that those synaptic connections, the brain connections, can be resolved before they get older and becomes more permanent, right? So as our brain gets older, or as we get older, those things are harder to manipulate. So when kids are struggling in the younger years, like really trying to get their reading and their letters and their, handwriting of letters, making sure they're the right direction, the right shape, the right size, they're not drawing letters earlier than later, 5, 6, 7 years old, or else that starts to, become something more imprinted in the brain. But when you take the time to show them that they are so good at something that other kids are struggling with, their math is beyond what their grade level their peers are, the confidence soars. And this is what happens when you can teach to exactly what a child doesn't know. You can push them in some levels or some areas where, it's just a natural progression because something's easy for them. And then, teach to the gaps. By teaching to one missing gap, the strategies of some word patterns or some spelling patterns or vocabulary, it actually gets transferred to other words automatically. So I have a very direct way of teaching to kids gaps in knowledge. There's about 10, 11 different things that I pull from to just get them from one level to the next level. And I've just found over, 20 years, and this will be part of the reading program that I eventually will create, that when we do specific work to some words that they're missing, then, or some patterns they're missing, then that transfers to more almost implicitly. I have a lot of kids who need very explicit, why do we need a period? Why do we need a capital? Why is this the correct word for anything? And so when I talk about teaching to the next logical step, in math, it's the next concept or topic or way to stretch the number sense, the mental math. In reading, it's the next level book or content, but also the specific word patterns they don't know through all the tools, word rings, word study, word mastery with Clay, to fill in their gaps with spelling and writing. It's having them rewrite what they don't know, rewrite their own mistakes, not just editing for them. With vocabulary and deepening their diction, it's addressing their exact words that they don't know that comes through their out loud reading, no matter what grade, elementary, middle school, or high school, through a 4-part vocabulary development. What is the definition? What are the synonyms and antonyms? What is a sentence of context of your own? Kids need at least 10, which is very low, exposures, hearing, using a word to fully understand them and to be excellent at them. So yeah, the Creating Confident Learners reading program will be coming out hopefully in the next few months. I do need to start with that, but the brainstorm is already there. And I'll be sure to keep all of you that are on the newsletter informed to be the first to sign up. But back to this concept of kids who wiggle. The earlier we can help the students who are wiggling, whether it's second grade or later in their academic path, the less the gaps between where they are and where they need to be academically becomes. And often when they have their core subject solidified through direct instruction and taking out that fluff, they have the opportunity to embrace how they learn and then become the leaders in their class once the right tools are in place for them. A lot of these kids, they're motivated by, showing other people their skills, wanting to be at the top of their class, sharing their knowledge, but until they feel confident, that opportunity to be a leader in their own class isn't there. It's not these kids who wiggle. It's oftentimes not that they can't, but they've missed something in their foundational years for whatever reason. Confidence, lack of focus or maturity. But once they have a strong foundation across the board with the core subjects that's been pointed out to them of where they're missing and worked on to the extent, sometimes it's 5 minutes practice, sometimes it's a few hours of practice, sometimes it's really sitting with them and getting them caught up so they're not overwhelmed, and sometimes it's figuring out those skills that are missing. But when there's a strong foundation across the board in the core subjects, then they can really thrive, and that wiggle that we see goes away. Be sure to sign up for the Foundation course. This course is here to support you. It teaches the exact foundational tools I have used with students to ease anxiety and help raise confidence and self-esteem so that they can succeed in all areas of their lives, including academics. It's available as a one-time purchase or as an ongoing monthly subscription with extra group support and monthly live stream. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter to stay in contact. Keep up with the Creating Confident Learners community on Instagram and Facebook at Creating Confident Learners. Have a blessed day and aloha!